The motion light flickered on for the third time that night, illuminating nothing but swirling snow and darkness. Evelyn Moss told herself it was just the wind, just the storm playing tricks. But when she heard that faint cry cutting through the howling cold, something inside her shifted. She could go back inside where it was warm and safe, or she could step into the freezing night and investigate. What Evelyn didn't know was that this single choice would shatter 30 years of hiding and pull her back into a world she'd sworn to leave behind forever. And the small figure she was about to find half buried in the snow, that child wasn't lost. She was running from people who would do anything to get her back. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The winter came down hard that year, harder than anyone in town could remember. It wasn't just cold, it was the kind of cold that reached through walls, through layers of clothing, through skin and bone until it settled somewhere deep inside you. The kind that made people stay indoors, close their curtains, and pretend the world outside didn't exist. Evelyn Moss had lived through 68 winters, and she knew this one was different. She felt it in her joints first, the way the ache settled deeper than usual when she woke each morning. Then she heard it in the silence, the unnatural quiet that fell over the streets when even the birds stopped singing. The weather forecasters on her small kitchen television spoke in urgent tones about record lows and dangerous conditions, their faces tight with concern she rarely saw. Her house sat at the edge of town, a modest two-bedroom structure with faded yellow siding and a sagging front porch she kept meaning to fix. She'd lived there alone for 7 years now, ever since Marcus passed. Heart attack, sudden and brutal, leaving her with a paid-off mortgage, a freezer full of casseroles from the church ladies, and a silence so loud it sometimes woke her at night. She didn't mind the quiet most days. After 43 years of marriage, of Marcus's booming laugh and constant tinkering in the garage, the stillness had become something like companionship. She had her routines: morning coffee at 6, game shows in the afternoon, a slow walk around the block when her knees allowed it. The neighborhood kids waved sometimes, though fewer people seemed to see her these days. She'd become part of the landscape, as invisible as the mailbox or the old oak tree in her yard. That evening, the power had been flickering on and off for hours. Evelyn moved through her house with practiced efficiency, lighting candles, checking flashlights, filling pots with water before the pipes froze. She'd pulled on 2 sweaters over her house dress and wrapped a thick shawl around her shoulders. The furnace rattled and wheezed, fighting against the cold pressing in from all sides. Around 8 o'clock, she stood at her kitchen sink washing her dinner plate when the motion light by her back fence suddenly blazed to life. She paused, hands still in the soapy water, watching through the window. The light illuminated nothing but swirling snow and bare branches bending under the wind's assault. After a moment, it clicked off. She returned to her dishes. 3 minutes later, it flicked on again. Evelyn dried her hands slowly, frowning. No animals ventured out in weather like this. The Hendersons' cat had sense enough to stay indoors, and even the raccoons that usually raided her trash cans were hiding somewhere warm. She watched the lit patch of yard, waiting for movement, for some explanation. Nothing. The light went dark again. She told herself it was the storm, some trick of wind and snow triggering the sensor, but something nagged at her, a feeling she couldn't quite name. In all her years in this house, that light had never acted up before. She stood at the window longer than necessary, studying the darkness beyond the glass, before finally turning away. The evening crept forward. She settled into her armchair with a book she'd been reading for 3 weeks, the same mystery novel she kept falling asleep over. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. Tree branches scraped against the siding like skeletal fingers. Every sound felt amplified in the empty house, each creak and groan a reminder of how alone she was. At 9:30, she decided to take the trash out before bed. She'd been putting it off, but the kitchen garbage was starting to smell, and she hated waking up to that odor. She bundled herself in her heavy coat, the one Marcus had bought her 15 years ago, that still held his smell if she pressed her face into the collar. Scarf, gloves, boots that pinched her feet but kept them dry. The cold hit her like a physical blow when she opened the back door. Her breath crystallized instantly, hanging in the air like frozen words. The snow had piled high against her steps, and she had to kick through it to reach the ground. Each step was a labor, her boots sinking deep into drifts that reached her knees in places. She made her way to the trash cans at the side of the house, moving slowly, carefully. A fall out here could be the end of her. She'd heard about old Mrs. Patterson 2 streets over, who'd slipped on ice last winter and broken her hip. 6 months later, she was in a nursing home, staring at walls until she died. Evelyn dumped the trash and was turning back toward the house when she heard it. A sound, faint, almost lost beneath the wind's constant roar. She stopped, one boot halfway through a drift, listening. There it was again, thin and high like a wounded animal or a branch bending to its breaking point, but something in the quality of it made the hair on her arms stand up beneath all those layers. She knew that sound, even muffled as it was. She'd raised 2 babies of her own, had worked in a hospital nursery for 5 years in her 20s. That was crying. "Hello?" Her voice came out rougher than intended, torn away almost immediately by the wind. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder. "Is someone there?" The sound came again, slightly stronger this time. Not from the front, from behind her property, somewhere past the fence line where the yard sloped down into a small ravine filled with scrub brush and wild grass. Nobody went back there, especially not in winter. Evelyn's first instinct was to go inside, call the police, let someone younger and stronger deal with whatever this was. Her knees throbbed, her fingers were already going numb even inside her gloves. She had no business trudging through the snow in the dark, chasing sounds that might be nothing more than wind through metal or some trick of her aging ears. But then she heard it clearly, just for a second, cutting through a lull in the storm. "Help!" The word was so small, so broken, it barely sounded human. Evelyn moved without thinking, her body overriding the sensible protests of her mind. She pushed through the gate in her back fence, holding onto the post for balance as she navigated the slope beyond. The snow was deeper here, untouched and treacherous. Her boots slipped, and she went down hard on one knee, pain shooting through her leg. She bit back a curse Marcus would have laughed at, and hauled herself upright using a low-hanging branch. "I'm coming," she called out, though she had no idea if anyone could hear her. "Keep talking to me. Where are you?" Only the wind answered. She kept going, each step harder than the last. The cold was seeping through her coat now, finding every gap and weak point. Her lungs burned with each breath. This was foolish. This was how old women died, frozen in their own backyards because they were too stubborn to know better. Her foot hit something solid. For a terrible moment she thought it was a log, and she nearly stepped over it. But the shape was wrong, too round, too soft. She looked down and her heart stopped. A small body curled on its side against the base of her fence, half buried in snow, dusted white like something already dead. Oh God, baby, no!" Evelyn dropped to her knees, her hands shaking as she brushed snow away from a small face, a child. A little girl with pale skin gone blue-gray, lips the color of slate, eyelashes frozen together with ice crystals. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. She wore a thin jacket that might have been adequate for autumn, but was criminally insufficient for tonight, and her hands were bare, fingers curled into frozen claws. The child's eyes opened slightly, unfocused, rolling back. "Stay with me." Evelyn's voice came out sharp, commanding, the voice she'd used when her own children had tried to drift off when they shouldn't. "You hear me? Stay awake." She yanked off her own coat with fumbling fingers and wrapped it around the small body, scooping the child up with a strength she didn't know she still possessed. The girl weighed almost nothing, a bundle of frozen bones and soaked clothing. Evelyn held her close, trying to share whatever warmth her old body could provide, and began the agonizing journey back to the house. Each step was a battle. The slope that had been treacherous coming down was nearly impossible going up, especially carrying the child's dead weight. Evelyn's boots slipped twice, and she went down once, protecting the girl's head with her hand as her shoulder hit the ground. She tasted blood where she'd bitten her tongue, felt something pull painfully in her back. "Almost there," she gasped, though she didn't know who she was reassuring. "Almost home." Getting up the back steps took 3 tries. Getting through the door took the last of her strength. She stumbled into the kitchen and kept going, making it to the living room before her legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, still clutching the child, fumbling for the phone on the side table. Her hand stopped before she reached it. In the warmth of the living room, with the lamp throwing soft light across them, Evelyn finally got a good look at the girl. Blonde hair, matted and frozen into clumps that would need patient untangling. Expensive-looking shoes, though they were soaked through, the kind with reinforced toes and proper ankle support. That jacket, now that she could see it properly in decent lighting, wasn't cheap either. The material was weather-resistant nylon, the stitching professional, the cut tailored. This wasn't a child from their neighborhood. This wasn't a child who'd simply wandered out into the storm on accident. And then the girl's eyes opened, just a fraction. Blue eyes startlingly bright against her pale skin, sharp with an intelligence that didn't match her age, focused directly on Evelyn's face with an awareness that sent a small chill down the older woman's spine. The child's cracked lips moved. The words came out in a whisper so faint Evelyn had to lean close to hear them. "Please don't let them find me." The voice held such raw terror that Evelyn felt it in her bones. Not the fear of being lost, the fear of being found. Her hand moved away from the phone. "Hush now," she said softly, already moving into action. "Nobody's finding you tonight. We've got to get you warm first." She carried the child to the bathroom, running warm water, not hot. Too much heat too fast could be dangerous, could send a hypothermic body into shock. She'd learned that during her years working in medical wards before she'd taken early retirement, and everyone had stopped asking questions about why she'd left so suddenly, why she'd walked away from a career she'd spent 15 years building. She stripped off the wet clothes with gentle hands, noting details even as she worked. The jacket had a label, but it had been carefully removed, cut away with precision. The girl's underclothes were plain, institutional almost, the kind bought in bulk without thought to pattern or color. Evelyn wrapped her in towels, warmed in the dryer, carried her back to the couch, bundled her in blankets. She made weak sugar water, held it to the blue lips, coaxing small sips. The girl swallowed reflexively, some survival instinct still functioning even as her eyes drifted closed again. That's it, little bit at a time. She massaged the small hands gently, trying to restore circulation, watching the fingernails slowly shift from blue back toward pink. She checked the feet next, relieved to find them cold but not frozen solid. This child had been out there for hours, but somehow, miraculously, she'd survived. The night stretched on. Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat in the chair beside the couch, watching the child breathe, adjusting blankets, offering water every hour. The storm raged outside, throwing snow against the windows, but inside, in the small circle of lamplight, there was only warmth and silence and the steady rise and fall of a small chest. Around 3 in the morning, the girl began to shiver violently. Evelyn recognized it as a good sign, the body finally warming enough to respond properly. She added another blanket, moved closer, placed her hand on the child's forehead. "You're safe," she murmured, knowing it might be a lie, but saying it anyway. "You're safe now." The shivering gradually subsided, the breathing deepened, and Evelyn sat watch, an old woman keeping vigil over a stranger's child, unaware that in pulling this girl from the snow, she'd pulled something else into her life entirely. Morning came gray and cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried in white silence. Evelyn's back ached from sleeping upright in the chair, and her neck protested when she tried to move it. She was too old for all-night vigils, but the child was still breathing, still warm, and that was enough. She was making coffee when she heard movement from the living room. Not the slow stirring of someone waking naturally, but a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The sound of someone snapping into consciousness, already afraid. Evelyn set down the coffee pot and moved to the doorway slowly, making sure the child could see her coming. The girl was sitting up, blankets clutched to her chest, eyes wide and scanning the room with the systematic precision of someone trained to assess threats. Her gaze swept across the furniture, noting exits and obstacles, checked the windows for movement or shadows, evaluated the doorways for approach angles before finally landing on Evelyn with the wariness of a cornered animal deciding whether to fight or flee. They stared at each other for a long moment. "Good morning," Evelyn said gently. "You're in my home. You're safe. Do you remember last night?" The girl's jaw tightened. After a pause, she nodded once, a tiny movement. "I'm Evelyn Moss. This is my house. You were freezing in the snow behind my fence, so I brought you inside." She kept her voice soft, the way she'd once spoken to frightened children in hospital beds. "What's your name, honey?" The girl's eyes darted to the windows again before returning to Evelyn's face. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Sarah," she said finally, but something in the way she said it felt wrong, like she'd chosen the name from a list rather than claimed it as her own. "Sarah," Evelyn repeated. "That's a pretty name. Are you hungry, Sarah? I can make you some breakfast." The girl nodded, and Evelyn saw her throat work in a hard swallow. When was the last time this child had eaten? She made scrambled eggs and toast, brought it out on a tray with orange juice and water. The girl ate like someone who'd been taught manners but had forgotten them in the face of genuine hunger. She used the fork properly but shoveled food into her mouth fast enough that Evelyn worried she might choke. Within minutes, the plate was empty. "More?" Evelyn asked. "Another?" Evelyn nodded. The second plate disappeared almost as quickly as the first. Evelyn watched, saying nothing, just refilling the juice glass when it emptied. When the girl finally slowed down, she seemed to realize what she'd done and flushed, looking down at her lap. "It's all right, baby. You needed it." Evelyn settled into the chair across from her. "Sarah, I need to ask you some questions. Where are your parents?" The girl's shoulders tensed. "I don't know." "Where do you live?" "I don't remember." "How did you end up in the snow behind my house?" A longer pause this time. "I fell off a bus." Evelyn kept her face neutral, but her mind was working. "What kind of bus?" "Just a regular bus." "Where was it going?" The girl's eyes went distant. "I don't know. I wasn't paying attention." "What did the driver look like?" "I don't remember." Every answer was a wall, polite but impenetrable. Evelyn had raised 2 children and worked with dozens more. She knew when a child was lying, and she knew when they were telling a carefully prepared story. This felt like both. She tried a different approach. Your jacket is hanging in the bathroom. It's drying out. I can get it for you if you'd like. Okay. No particular emotion. You have pretty shoes. Where did you get them? A flicker of something in the girl's expression, gone almost immediately. I don't remember. Evelyn let the silence stretch. Sometimes quiet revealed more than questions. The girl shifted in the blankets, her eyes moving to the window again. Then the front door, then back to Evelyn, calculating, always calculating. Sarah, honey, I need to take you to see a doctor. You were out in the cold for a long time. We need to make sure you're all right. The reaction was instant and unmistakable. The girl's entire body went rigid, her face draining of what little color had returned. No. Sweetheart, you could have frostbite or no doctors. The girl's voice climbed higher. Please, no doctors, no hospitals. I'm fine. I feel fine. Evelyn raised her hands in a calming gesture. All right, no doctors right now, but if you start feeling sick or your fingers start hurting, you have to tell me. The girl nodded quickly, her breathing still too fast. How about you rest a bit more? You've been through something terrible. Your body needs time to recover. Okay. The word came out small, relieved. Evelyn stood to clear the dishes, and as she passed the couch, she noticed something. The girl's accent, subtle but present. It wasn't from around here. It had a flatness to it, a precision in the consonants that suggested somewhere northern, maybe even Canadian. But when she'd said her name, the accent had slipped completely, like she was remembering to use it. She took the dishes to the kitchen and ran water over them, thinking. While her hands worked automatically, her mind picked at details. The jacket in the bathroom was expensive, she'd noticed that much. Not designer, but quality, the kind of thing that cost $200 at least. The shoes were the same, leather with good arch support, barely worn. This wasn't a child from a struggling family. After drying the last plate, Evelyn returned to the bathroom and picked up the jacket, examining it more carefully in the morning light. The tag at the neck had been removed, but not recently. The stitching where it had been cut away was faded. She checked the pockets. Empty, turned it inside out. That's when she saw it. Hidden in the lining near the hem, so subtle she almost missed it. A small sewn tag, corporate-looking, with a string of numbers. Not a brand, not a size, just numbers. And beneath them, a symbol that made her pause. A stylized medical cross intersecting with what looked like a compass rose. She'd seen that symbol before, a long time ago, in a place she'd spent decades trying to forget. Her hands were shaking slightly as she set the jacket down. She walked back to the living room, forcing her expression into something calm. The girl was curled on her side now, eyes closed, but Evelyn could tell from her breathing that she wasn't sleeping. She was listening, monitoring, staying alert, even in apparent rest. Sarah, Evelyn said quietly, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. When you said, don't let them find me last night, who did you mean? The girl's eyes opened. For the first time, she looked directly at Evelyn with something like desperation. The people I was with, she whispered. They weren't bad to me, but they wouldn't let me leave. And I heard them talking about moving me somewhere else, somewhere far away where I wouldn't know anyone. Who were these people? Foster parents, a group home? The girl shook her head. It was like a school, but not a regular school. We didn't have normal classes. We had tests instead. Lots of tests. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. What kind of tests? Memory tests. Pictures we had to remember. Numbers we had to repeat backwards. Sometimes they'd make it really cold and see how long we could stay focused. They said I was special. They said my brain worked different from other kids. She pulled the blankets tighter. There was a man there, Mr. Hale. He was in charge. He was always watching us through windows, writing things down. Where was this school? I don't know. They drove us there at night with the windows blocked. Some of the older kids said we were somewhere in the mountains, but I never saw them. Evelyn's mind was racing. How many children were there? 12, but last month 3 of them left. Mr. Hale said they'd moved to the next program. One of the older girls, Maya, she told me that meant they were being sent away forever. She said once you go to the next program, you never come back. How did you get away? During the storm, everyone was busy trying to keep the power on. There was a door in the laundry room that didn't lock. Right, I'd been checking it. For weeks. When I heard Mr. Hale say my name, say I was scheduled for evaluation next week. She trailed off, her small hands clenching in the blankets. I ran. I just ran into the snow. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't let them send me away. Evelyn sat slowly, her mind cataloging every word, every detail. This wasn't a simple runaway. This wasn't even simple abuse. This was organized, systematic, the kind of thing that had people behind it, resources, reach, the kind of thing she'd helped dismantle once before, in another lifetime. That night, the girl woke screaming. Evelyn was beside her in seconds, holding small shoulders as the child thrashed in the grip of a nightmare. It's okay, baby. You're safe. You're with me. Mr. Hale, the girl gasped between sobs. He's coming. He said he's coming to take me back. He said I can't hide. He'll always find me. Shh. Nobody's taking you anywhere, I promise. The girl clung to her, shaking, and Evelyn held her until the trembling stopped, until the breathing evened out, until the small body finally went limp with exhaustion. She smoothed the blonde hair back from the damp forehead and sang softly, something her own grandmother had sung to her once, words in a language she'd half forgotten. Later, after the girl had fallen back into an uneasy sleep, Evelyn went to the bathroom and examined the jacket again. She used her sewing scissors to carefully open the hidden tag, extracting the folded paper she'd found earlier. Under the lamp, she could see it clearly now. The string of numbers wasn't random. It was formatted like an ID code, the kind used in federal databases. And that symbol, the medical cross and compass rose, was exactly what she'd thought. It was the logo of a research initiative that had officially shut down 30 years ago. An initiative that had focused on identifying children with unusual cognitive or physical resilience. An initiative she'd helped expose when it crossed too many ethical lines. An initiative that had apparently never really ended at all. Evelyn refolded the paper, her hands steady now despite the implications. She looked toward the living room where the child slept, and then at the phone on the wall. She could call the police right now, hand this over to people who were supposed to handle it, get this nightmare out of her house and back into the hands of authorities who might or might not do the right thing. Or she could remember what she knew about people who ran programs like this, about how deep their connections ran, about how children who threatened their secrecy tended to disappear into systems that asked no questions. She thought about the terror in the girl's eyes when she'd mentioned doctors, the way she scanned rooms like someone trained to expect danger, the precise way she'd described tests and observations and being told she was special, valuable, different. Evelyn had spent the last 30 years being invisible, being quiet, letting the world move past her like she was already a ghost. She'd buried everything about who she used to be, what she used to do, what she'd once been capable of. She looked at that folded paper one more time, then carried it to her bedroom and placed it in the old trunk at the foot of her bed. The trunk Marcus had always wondered about, but never pushed her to explain. The trunk that held pieces of a woman the world had forgotten existed. She didn't lock it, not yet, but she knew she might need it soon. Back in the living room, she settled into her chair and watched the girl sleep. In the lamplight, the child looked impossibly small, impossibly fragile. But Evelyn knew better. This girl had survived something most adults couldn't. She'd escaped into a blizzard with nothing but determination and the certainty that whatever waited outside was better than what she was leaving behind. That took strength most people never discovered. The motion light in the backyard clicked on, suddenly, flooding the snow with harsh brightness. Evelyn stared at it, watching for movement. It stayed on for 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then it went dark. She didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat in her chair, watching the windows, listening to every sound the old house made. And when morning finally came gray and cold again, she made a decision she knew would change everything. She would not give this child back. Not to people who spoke in codes and numbers. Not to people who ran programs that didn't officially exist. Not to anyone who looked at a little girl and saw something to be studied, rather than someone to be protected. Whatever came next, whatever price that choice demanded, she would pay it. She'd been invisible too long anyway. It was time to remember how to be seen. The days that followed fell into an uneasy rhythm. Evelyn kept the girl close, kept the curtains drawn just enough to see out, without being seen clearly from the street. She told herself she was being cautious, not paranoid, but every car that drove past too slowly made her pulse quicken. Every unexpected sound had her reaching for the phone she still hadn't used to call anyone. The girl was healing physically. The blue tinge had left her lips, and warmth had returned to her extremities. But emotionally, she remained a tightly wound spring, always listening, always watching. She slept in short bursts, waking at the smallest sound. She ate quickly, efficiently, like someone who'd learned not to take food for granted. And she never, not once, let her guard completely down. On the fourth day, Evelyn realized they were running low on supplies. The storm had kept her from her usual grocery run, and her pantry was looking sparse. She couldn't keep feeding a growing child on canned soup and crackers forever. "We need to go into town," Evelyn said that morning over breakfast, "just for a little while, to get some food." The girl's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Can I stay here?" "Honey, I can't leave you alone. What if something happened?" "I'll be fine. I'll lock the doors. I won't answer if anyone knocks." Evelyn studied her. The fear in those blue eyes was real, but so was something else. A calculation. The girl was already planning escape routes, already thinking about what she'd do if Evelyn didn't come back. "You're coming with me," Evelyn said firmly, "but we'll bundle you up good. Hat, scarf, coat. Nobody will get a good look at you." The girl didn't argue further, but her anxiety was palpable as Evelyn dressed her in layers. She'd bought the child some clothes from her own closet, things that were too big but serviceable. The girl disappeared into an oversized sweater and Marcus's old winter coat, the one that still hung in the hall closet, even after all these years. They drove into town in Evelyn's aging sedan. The girl hunched low in the back seat, despite Evelyn's assurances. The roads had been plowed but remained treacherous, lined with walls of dirty snow pushed to the sides. The town looked quiet, almost deserted. Most people were still staying home, recovering from the storm's aftermath. Evelyn parked in front of Miller's Grocery, the small store that had served the town for 40 years. "Stay close to me," she instructed. "Don't wander off." Inside, the fluorescent lights felt too bright after days in the dim house. Evelyn grabbed a cart and began moving through the aisles, selecting items with one eye always on the girl, who trailed behind her like a shadow. They were in the cereal aisle when Evelyn heard it, a television playing somewhere near the front of the store. The volume was low, but in the quiet store, sound carried. Evelyn's hand paused over a box of oatmeal as the news anchor's voice filtered through the air. Authorities continue to search for information regarding a child who went missing during last week's severe winter storm. The girl, whose identity is being protected as part of an ongoing private investigation, is believed to be approximately 8 to 9 years old. Evelyn's hand tightened on the shopping cart, her knuckles going white. She looked at the girl, who had gone completely still, her face drained of color. The child's breathing had quickened, shallow and rapid, and her eyes were fixed on some point in the distance, as if she could see the television through the shelves. "Keep walking," Evelyn murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nice and slow. Act natural. Just another grandmother shopping with her granddaughter." They continued through the store, but Evelyn's mind was racing. Private investigation, not a police matter, or they would have said so explicitly. Not an Amber Alert with a photo plastered across every screen and frantic parents begging for their child's return. Something else entirely, something controlled, something managed, something that carried the weight of institutional power, rather than parental desperation. As they approached the checkout, Evelyn glanced at the small television mounted above the register. The news had moved on to weather reports, but the damage was done. Someone was looking. Someone was making noise, even if they weren't showing the girl's face. She paid quickly, avoiding prolonged eye contact with the cashier, an older man named Frank, who'd worked there since before Evelyn moved to town. As she was loading bags into her cart, she noticed something through the store's front window. A black SUV, parked across the street, out-of-state plates, tinted windows. It had been there when they arrived, she realized. She'd dismissed it as someone else shopping, but now, looking more carefully, she could see a figure in the driver's seat. Not moving, not getting out, just sitting there. "Come on, baby," she said, keeping her voice light. "Let's get home." They loaded the groceries into the car. Evelyn forced herself not to rush, not to look at the SUV again. She started the engine, pulled out of the parking spot, and drove toward home at a normal speed. Her eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror. The SUV didn't follow, but as they turned onto her street 10 minutes later, she saw it again. Different SUV, different position, but the same dark color, the same tinted windows. Parked 3 houses down from hers, on a street where everyone knew everyone's vehicles. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pulled into her driveway. That evening there was a knock at the door. Evelyn had just finished putting away the groceries. The girl was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book Evelyn had found in her closet, something she'd bought for a grandchild who rarely visited. At the sound of the knock, the child's head snapped up, her eyes going wide with terror. "Go to the back room," Evelyn said quietly. "Close the door. Don't make a sound." The girl disappeared without argument, moving with practiced silence. Evelyn waited a moment, composing herself, smoothing down her sweater and taking a slow breath before walking to the front door. Through the peephole, she saw a sheriff's deputy standing on her porch. Young, maybe 30, with a clean uniform and an uncomfortable expression. He kept glancing at a notepad in his hand, then back at the door, as if rehearsing what he needed to say. She opened the door partway, keeping her body in the gap. "Can I help you?" "Evening, ma'am. I'm Deputy Harrison. Sorry to bother you, but we're doing a neighborhood check following last week's storm, making sure everyone's all right, seeing if anyone noticed any unusual activity during or after the weather event." "I'm fine, thank you. Storm was rough, but I made it through." She kept her voice pleasant, neighborly, the tone of someone who had nothing to hide and was simply being cooperative with local law enforcement doing their job. "You didn't lose power for too long?" "Few hours here and there. Nothing serious. My furnace held up better than I expected, considering its age." He nodded, glancing at a small notebook in his hand, flipping back a page as if consulting notes. "Did you happen to notice anything unusual during the storm? Anyone who didn't belong in the neighborhood? Strange vehicles? Anyone walking around when they shouldn't have been?" Evelyn kept her face neutral, her expression mildly thoughtful, as if genuinely trying to remember. "Can't say I did. I mostly stayed inside during the worst of it. My eyes aren't what they used to be, especially at night. And frankly, I was more concerned with keeping my pipes from freezing than watching the street." "Right, of course." He hesitated, and something in his expression shifted subtly. His professional mask slipped just slightly, revealing genuine concern underneath. He lowered his voice, glancing over his shoulder as if checking whether anyone was listening. "Ma'am, I need to ask. You haven't seen a child around here, have you? Young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, blonde hair?" "A child? In this weather? No, I haven't seen any children out at all." "Right. Well, if you do see anything or remember something, please give us a call." He handed her a card with the department's number. "Of course. Stay warm out there, deputy." She closed the door and stood there, listening to his boots retreat down the porch steps. Through the window, she watched him climb into his patrol car, watched him sit there for a long moment before starting the engine and driving away. But he didn't go far. He parked at the end of the street, his car visible from her living room window. The girl emerged from the back room, her face pale. "He asked about me. He asked about a child. Could be any child. He knows I'm here. They know. Nobody knows anything for certain." Evelyn moved to the window, peering through the curtains at the patrol car. "They're fishing, looking for signs." That night, the girl woke screaming again, but this time, when Evelyn rushed to her side, the child grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "I heard boots," the girl gasped. "On your floor, just like at the school. They're coming." "Shh, baby, that was the deputy this afternoon, that's all." "No, in my dream, but it wasn't a dream. I remember now. I remember what Mr. Hale said the night before I ran." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He said they'd found the perfect placement for me, that I was going somewhere I could reach my full potential, and when one of the handlers asked where, he said he couldn't tell her, that it was classified." Evelyn felt cold. "Did he say anything else?" "He said I should be grateful, that most children never get opportunities like this, that I was special." The girl's grip tightened. "But Maya told me that's what they told her friend before he left, and when she asked the staff what happened to him, they acted like he'd never existed. They cleared out his room the same day, erased him." Evelyn held her close, but her mind was working. Classified placement, private investigation, out-of-state vehicles conducting surveillance. This wasn't just some rogue program operating in the shadows. This had resources, reach, the kind of infrastructure that didn't just disappear because someone shut it down 30 years ago, the kind that learned to hide better. 2 days later, she took the girl to a small clinic on the edge of town. Not the main hospital, but a walk-in urgent care run by a nurse practitioner named Diane Fuller, someone Evelyn had met occasionally at the grocery store over the years. She figured a quick check for frostbite damage was warranted, and a smaller clinic meant fewer questions. She'd been wrong. Diane examined the girl with professional efficiency, checking her fingers and toes, listening to her lungs, taking her temperature. The whole time, the girl sat rigid, answering questions in monosyllables, her eyes tracking every movement. It was when Diane took the girl's wrist to check her pulse that everything changed. "Where did you get this bracelet?" Diane asked, her voice suddenly sharp. Evelyn looked closer. On the girl's wrist, half hidden by the sleeve of her borrowed sweater, was a thin medical alert bracelet. Evelyn had noticed it before, but hadn't paid it much attention. It looked like any standard alert tag, the kind that indicated allergies or medical conditions. "I've always had it," the girl said carefully. Diane's face had changed. She looked at Evelyn with something like suspicion, something like fear. "Can I speak with you outside for a moment?" They stepped into the hallway, leaving the girl in the examination room. "Where exactly did you find her?" Diane asked, her voice low. I didn't find her. She's my great-niece. She's visiting. Mrs. Moss, I've lived in this town for 15 years. You've never mentioned any family visiting. It was last minute. Her parents had an emergency. Diane stared at her for a long moment. That bracelet isn't a medical alert tag. It's a tracking identifier, the kind used in clinical studies, high-end ones, usually research hospitals or specialized programs. She paused. I saw ones like it when I did rotation at a government facility during my training. They don't give those to just anyone. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. What are you saying? I'm saying that child is involved in something official, something monitored, and whoever's monitoring her is going to be looking. Diane glanced back at the examination room. I have to report this. You understand that, don't you? If she's part of some medical study, if she's supposed to be somewhere. What if where she's supposed to be isn't safe? That's not for me to determine. Diane, please, just give me time to figure this out. The nurse practitioner shook her head. I can give you until end of day. After that, I have to make calls. I could lose my license if I don't. She softened slightly. I'm sorry, but this is too big for me to ignore. Evelyn drove home in silence, the girl quiet beside her. She had hours, maybe less. Once Diane made those calls, people would come. The right people, the wrong people. She had no way of knowing which. But they would come, and they would take the girl, and Evelyn would never know what happened to her. That night, as the girl slept fitfully on the couch, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and her old rotary phone. She stared at it for a long time, remembering a number she hadn't called in 3 decades, remembering a voice she'd hoped never to hear again. Finally, she picked up the receiver and dialed. Her fingers remembered the sequence, even though her conscious mind had tried to forget it. 7 digits, an area code she associated with memories she'd buried, a connection to a past she'd promised Marcus she'd never revisit. The phone rang 4 times. Each ring felt like an eternity, and Evelyn found herself counting heartbeats between them. Then a man's voice, older now but still familiar, despite the decades, answered with professional caution. This is a secure line. Identify yourself. It's Evelyn Moss. We worked together in Baltimore, 1992 to 1995. Her voice came out steady despite the tremor in her hands. A long pause. She could hear breathing on the other end, could almost picture Thomas processing the impossibility of her call. Evelyn, Jesus Christ, I thought you were dead. After you disappeared, after everything went silent, we all assumed. I've been quiet, Thomas, living small, staying invisible, but I need your help now. After what happened? After you testified and disappeared? His voice carried old bitterness, old wounds that hadn't quite healed. You know they buried that whole operation, destroyed careers, ruined reputations. I barely survived it. Took me 10 years to rebuild any kind of credibility in the field. I know, and I wouldn't call if it wasn't critical. If there was anyone else I could turn to, I would, but there isn't. She took a breath, steadying herself. They're still running it, Thomas. The program. It never stopped. And I have one of their children in my house right now. Another pause, longer this time. She could hear him typing on a keyboard, the rapid click of keys suggesting he was already pulling up databases, cross-referencing information. Where are you? She gave him the town name, spelling it out clearly, heard him typing more quickly. Stay put. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't make any more calls. I need to make some contacts, verify some things, confirm what you're telling me. This line secure on your end? As secure as a 30-year-old rotary phone in a small-town house can be. Good enough? It'll have to be. Give me 4 hours. I need to wake some people up, call in some favors. And Evelyn? His voice softened slightly. If you're wrong about this, if you're just harboring some runaway because you're lonely or confused, I'm not wrong. I've seen the identifiers. I know what they look like. I helped design them, remember? This is real, Thomas. They're really still doing it. 4 hours, he repeated, and hung up. Evelyn sat in the darkness, listening to the old house settle around her. 4 hours. It felt like both forever and no time at all. She was checking the locks for the 3rd time when she saw the headlights. A car moving slowly down her street. Not the patrol car. Not an SUV. A sedan, dark and nondescript. It paused in front of her house, and Evelyn's hand went instinctively to the kitchen knife she'd left on the counter. The car moved on. But 5 minutes later, another one passed. Then another. They were circling, establishing patterns, building a picture of who came and went, what was normal and what wasn't. Evelyn went to her bedroom and opened the trunk she'd told herself she'd never open again. The hinges protested, stiff from years of disuse, and the smell that emerged was musty, tinged with old paper and memories she'd tried to bury. Inside were things she'd packed away when she left Baltimore, when she'd promised herself and Marcus that she was done with that life forever. Documents in sealed folders, their edges yellowed with age. A small handgun she'd kept despite Marcus's protests, its weight familiar and terrible in her hand. Photographs of people whose faces she'd tried to forget. Colleagues and victims and perpetrators all mixed together in a past she'd never fully escaped. And at the bottom, beneath everything else, hidden under false documentation and medical records, a slim folder marked with a code she still remembered despite trying to forget it. Inside were names, addresses, contact information for people in the program, both victims and perpetrators, both the children they'd studied and the adults who'd studied them. Information she'd gathered before everything fell apart, before the investigation was shut down from above, before she was told in no uncertain terms that her testimony would be sealed permanently and she would never speak of it again on penalty of prosecution. She'd kept it anyway. Insurance, she'd told herself at the time. Evidence if the day ever came when someone was willing to listen, when someone with real power decided that the truth mattered more than institutional protection. That day had arrived. She was flipping through the folder when she heard the knock. Not tentative like the deputies had been. Hard, demanding, the knock of someone who expected to be answered. Evelyn froze. Too soon for Thomas, too late for it to be innocent. The knock came again, harder this time. She moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 3 people stood on her porch. 2 men in heavy dark coats, and a woman holding a tablet, her face illuminated by its glow. Not uniforms, not police. Too coordinated, too professional. "Mrs. Moss?" one of the men called out. "We need to speak with you. It's important." She didn't answer, didn't move. "We know you're in there," the woman said, her voice carrying clearly through the door. "We just want to talk. We're with a private guardianship program. We're looking for a child who's in serious danger." Evelyn's hand tightened on the curtain. The girl was awake now. She could hear her moving in the other room, probably pressed against a wall, listening. "We have information that suggests you may have encountered this child," the woman continued. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just need to confirm whether you've seen her." One of the men stepped forward, his voice dropping to something that might have been meant to sound reassuring but came across as threatening. "Mrs. Moss, this is a matter of the child's safety. We've been authorized to locate her by any means necessary. We can do this the easy way with your cooperation, or we can involve local authorities and make this much more complicated for everyone involved." Evelyn stayed silent, watching. The woman with the tablet subtly shifted her position, trying to see past the edge of the curtain. Evelyn stepped back, out of sight. "We know about the clinic visit," the woman said. We know the child was examined this afternoon. We know she has identifying marks that match our records, and we know she's here." Before Evelyn could react, a neighbor's porch light switched on 3 houses down. Old Mr. Brennan, probably checking to see what the commotion was about. His dog started barking, a deep, aggressive sound that carried through the night. The 3 people on Evelyn's porch exchanged glances. The woman lowered her tablet. One of the men reached into his coat, and for a terrible moment, Evelyn thought he was going for a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a business card. "Think carefully about your next move, Mrs. Moss," he said, sliding the card under her door. "You don't want to be responsible for what happens if this child isn't returned to proper care. We'll be in touch." They walked back to their vehicle, a dark SUV parked at the curb, not hurrying, but not dawdling either. As they drove away, Evelyn noticed another vehicle start up 2 houses down, its lights off, following at a distance. She picked up the business card. It was blank except for a phone number and a logo, the same logo she'd seen on the girl's jacket. The medical cross and compass rose. The girl appeared in the doorway, shaking violently. "Those are them. That's who came to the school. The woman with the tablet, she was there when they took the other children away. She's the one who measured us, who recorded our responses, who decided who was ready for the next phase." Evelyn knelt down, taking the girl's cold hands in her own warmer ones. "Listen to me carefully. I need you to be brave a little while longer. I have someone coming who can help us, someone I trust from my old life. But until he gets here, until real help arrives, we need to be very careful, very quiet. They said I'm in danger, that I need proper care. They lied. They're very good at it." "How do you know they lied?" Evelyn met the girl's eyes. "Because I used to work with people like them. Before I realized what they really were. Before I understood what they were doing to children like you." The girl stared at her. "You were one of them?" "I helped them, yes, until I saw the truth. Then I tried to stop them, and that's when I learned just how powerful they were." "Did you stop them?" "I thought I had," Evelyn said quietly, "but it looks like I only made them more careful." They sat together quietly in the darkened living room, curtains drawn, lights off. Evelyn kept the kitchen knife close and her old service pistol closer. She'd never thought she'd need it again. But as the hours crawled past midnight, as car after car made slow passes down her street, she was grateful she'd kept it. Her phone rang sharply at 3 in the morning. "Evelyn, it's Thomas. I've made some calls. You were right. The program never shut down. It went private, got sold to some shell corporation with ties to both defense contractors and pharmaceutical companies. They've been running residential facilities across 4 states, identifying and studying children with unusual neurological resilience." "Are they hurting them?" "Not physically, but they're isolating them, testing them, preparing them for placements in classified programs. The children don't have a say. Most don't have families who are looking for them." "What about this girl?" "I don't have specifics yet. But if she ran, if she got away during that storm, they're going to be desperate to get her back, not just because of what she knows, but because of what she represents. A failure in their system, evidence that their security isn't as tight as they claim." "They're outside my house, Thomas. They've been circling for hours." "I know, I've got people on the way, but they're coming from DC. It's going to be dawn before they arrive. Can you hold out until then?" "I don't have much choice." "Evelyn, if they try to breach your home, if they come through that door, I know what to do." She'd learned that too in Baltimore, how to hold a position, how to protect a witness, how to buy time when time was all you had. "Good, I'll call you when my people are close." He hung up. Evelyn checked her gun again, made sure the safety was off, and settled in to wait. The girl had fallen asleep finally, exhausted by fear and adrenaline. Evelyn watched her in the dim light from the kitchen. So small, so young, and so terribly painfully valuable to people who saw children as resources rather than human beings. At 4:30 she heard an engine cut off nearby, then another, then footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. They were coming. Evelyn stood, positioning herself between the front door and the girl, her hand steady on the gun, her breathing controlled. 30 years fell away, and she remembered exactly who she used to be. Not an invisible old woman, a protector. The door handle rattled. Someone testing it, checking if she'd been foolish enough to leave it unlocked. She hadn't. "Mrs. Moss." The woman's voice, again, harder now. "We don't need permission. We only need confirmation, and we already have it." Evelyn raised the gun, pointing it at the door. "You're trespassing," she called out. "I'm armed. Leave my property now." A pause, then quiet laughter. "You're going to shoot federal contractors, Mrs. Moss? Over a child who isn't even yours? That's not a fight you want." "I've had this fight before," Evelyn said, "and I'm still here. Where are your predecessors?" Another pause, longer this time. The door handle stopped rattling, and then she heard it. In the distance, getting louder. Rotors, heavy ones. The footsteps retreated rapidly. Engines started. By the time the helicopter's searchlight swept across her yard, the SUVs were already disappearing around the corner. The girl woke, confused and terrified by the noise. Evelyn gathered her close, both of them shaking now. "It's okay," she whispered into the child's hair. "Help is here. Real help this time." And for the first time since she'd pulled a freezing child from the snow, Evelyn let herself believe it might actually be true. The helicopter touched down in the field behind Evelyn's property, just as the first hints of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. The girl woke screaming from the rotor noise, and Evelyn held her close, whispering reassurances while watching armed figures emerge from the aircraft. Her finger rested near the pistol's trigger guard, ready but not yet committed. Then she saw Thomas climb out, older than she remembered but unmistakable in the way he moved. The tension drained from her shoulders. "It's all right, baby," she murmured to Emma. "These are the good people. Real help, finally." The operatives who'd surrounded her house had scattered the moment the helicopter appeared, their black SUVs racing away into the pre-dawn darkness. Evelyn watched them go, knowing it wasn't over. People like that didn't give up. They regrouped, reassessed, returned with different strategies. Thomas knocked on her back door with a specific rhythm she recognized from their Baltimore days. 3 rapid taps, pause, 2 more. Their old signal for friendly approach. She opened the door to find him standing there with 4 others, all dressed in civilian clothes but carrying themselves with unmistakable purpose. Thomas's face had aged, his hair silver now instead of the dark brown she remembered, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence, the same weary determination. "Evelyn," he studied her for a long moment. "I thought I'd never see you again. I thought that was the plan. Plans change." He glanced past her to where Emma stood, trembling behind the kitchen table. "Is this her?" "Her name is Emma." Thomas entered slowly, his team fanning out to check windows and secure the house. He approached Emma with the careful gentleness of someone who'd worked with traumatized children before. "Hello, Emma. My name is Thomas. I'm a friend of Evelyn's, and I'm here to help you. Nobody's going to hurt you or take you anywhere you don't want to go. You have my word on that." Emma looked at Evelyn, seeking confirmation. "He's telling the truth, honey. Thomas is one of the good ones. I've known him a very long time." The girl relaxed fractionally. "The people who were here before, the ones with the tablet, they're gone?" "For now," Thomas said honestly. "But they'll come back with reinforcements. That's why we need to move quickly." He turned to Evelyn. "We need to talk, privately." They moved to the kitchen while one of Thomas's people, a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, sat with Emma and offered her hot chocolate. Evelyn could hear them talking softly, the woman's voice soothing, maternal. Thomas pulled out a tablet and began showing her encrypted files. After Baltimore imploded, after the investigation was shut down and buried under federal orders, we thought it was over. But a few of us kept watching, kept tracking certain names, and about 3 years ago things started connecting in ways that made us realize the program never stopped. It fragmented into 3 separate operations, all privatized, all technically legal on paper. Meridian Cognitive Solutions, Evelyn said. His eyebrows rose. You've done your homework. How did you find them? I found their logo on Emma's jacket lining, the same symbol from the old program. I knew it meant something. They kept it as internal branding, which tells you how arrogant they've become. Dr. Patricia Vance founded Meridian 5 years after Baltimore fell apart. She brought in half the old team, everyone who didn't face consequences. Evelyn felt sick. How many children are we talking about? That we know of? 47 currently in their facilities across 4 states. But those are just the ones we've been able to confirm. There could be satellite programs we haven't identified yet. He swiped through photographs of buildings that looked like expensive boarding schools. Meridian operates through a network of residential academies, beautiful facilities, everything top of the line. On paper, they provide intensive therapeutic intervention for gifted children from difficult backgrounds. But these children don't have parents fighting for them. Exactly. They identify kids with unusual psychological resilience. Orphans, foster cases, refugees, children from broken homes where nobody's looking too hard. Then they run them through what they describe as cutting-edge cognitive assessments, specialized education programs, trauma therapy. What's really happening? Thomas's jaw tightened. Stress tests that would be considered torture if applied to adults. Prolonged isolation, cognitive manipulation, temperature extremes, sleep deprivation disguised as sleep studies, all carefully documented, all framed as therapeutic intervention. They're identifying which children can endure the most psychological pressure without breaking, and the ones who excel. They call it the advanced program, invitation only. The kids who accept, who go to the next level, they disappear from all normal systems. No school records, no medical files, no social worker reports. It's like they cease to exist. Evelyn felt cold. Where do they go? That's what we've been trying to find out for 3 years. We have testimony from 2 kids who aged out before transfer. They described conditioning that sounded more like intelligence training, learning to maintain cover stories under pressure, emotional control exercises, language immersion, physical endurance training. One said they spent 6 months learning to lie convincingly while hooked up to stress monitors. They're building assets, Evelyn said. Children trained for deep cover operations. Kids with demonstrated resilience being prepared for work that would psychologically destroy normal adults. The kind of operations where you might be isolated for years, where breaking cover means death. He pulled up another file. And it's brilliantly evil. Children from the foster system, kids with no real family ties. If they disappear into classified work, who's going to come looking? And Emma. Thomas brought up her file. Her scores are extraordinary. 98th percentile on every resilience metric. Perfect candidate for advancement. She was scheduled for transfer to the mountain facility 3 weeks ago. But she ran, which makes her a catastrophic security breach. She can identify the facility location, personnel, routines, other children. She can describe specific testing protocols that would horrify any legitimate investigator. He paused. And she can testify that she wasn't there voluntarily. That undermines their entire legal framework. What about her real family? Thomas's expression softened. Mother died of an overdose when Emma was 4, father unknown. She bounced through 5 foster placements between ages 4 and 7. The last placement ended when the foster parents said she was too difficult, too withdrawn. Classic trauma response. Which made her perfect for Meridian. She entered state custody, was flagged by a social worker who receives consulting fees from Meridian. 6 months later, Emma was referred for specialized therapeutic intervention. They recruited her straight out of the system, where nobody asks too many questions. The social worker filed glowing reports. The state was happy to have one less difficult case. Everyone signed off. He closed the tablet, and for 2 years, Emma was subjected to assessments and conditioning that no child should experience. You said she's wearing a tracking bracelet. Real-time biometric monitoring, stress hormones, heart rate, sleep patterns, every moment measured, quantified, analyzed. They'd know when she was afraid, when she was lying, when she was reaching her breaking point. He pulled up specs. The storm knocked out their relay towers for 48 hours. Once systems came back online, they started triangulating her location. That's how they found my house. Within 12 hours. The contractors you saw were first response, hired muscle meant to retrieve her quickly and quietly. So they know she's here. They know I have her, and they know I'm not cooperating. Which means they'll escalate. But if this drags out, they'll send someone much more dangerous, someone who doesn't care about legal boundaries. Then we get her somewhere they can't reach. I have a place. Thomas showed her photos of a farmhouse surrounded by forest. Off-grid compound in West Virginia. Sarah Blackwood, former Secret Service. Now she runs sanctuary for people who've fallen through official protection. Witnesses who can't trust federal channels. Defectors with classified knowledge. Can you trust her? Absolutely. With my life. Already have. Twice. He met her eyes. Emma would be as safe there as anywhere on Earth. But that's only temporary. Meridian has resources, connections. Eventually, they'd find her. You're right, which is why exposure is the only real solution. Make enough noise that Meridian can't operate in shadows anymore. The files I kept from Baltimore, Evelyn said. Names, organizational charts, internal memos, victim testimonies. They could connect the old program directly to the new one. Thomas went very still. You kept files after they explicitly ordered all materials destroyed. I knew someday someone would need them. Evelyn, if Meridian knew you had those, they would have come for you years ago. Then it's good I've always been excellent at hiding things that matter. She paused. But those files, combined with Emma's testimony, with your investigation, that's enough to break this wide open. It could. But it also puts a target on your back. Once we go public with your identity, once they know you're alive and talking, let them come. I'm done hiding. They'll come hard. These people have connections in federal agencies, defense contractors, private security firms. They won't just try to discredit you, they'll try to destroy you. Evelyn thought about Marcus, about the quiet life she'd built on invisibility. Then she thought about Emma's face, about the 47 other children still trapped in Meridian's system. Some things are worth the fight. Thomas nodded slowly. Then we do this right. I'll take Emma to Sarah's compound today. You give me the Baltimore files and I'll deliver them to a journalist I trust at the Washington Post. Someone who broke the CIA black site's story. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated. When? Now. Today. Every hour we wait is another hour Meridian has to prepare, to move evidence, to relocate children. He met her eyes. But Evelyn, the moment those files go public, the moment that story breaks, They'll know it came from someone inside, someone who had access to the original investigation. They'll figure out it was me. Within hours, probably. You need to be somewhere defensible when that happens. She looked around her house at the life she'd built here. Marcus's chair, their wedding photo on the mantel, the small, comfortable world they'd created together. No, I'm staying here. Evelyn, this is my ground, my home. If they want me, they can come get me, but I won't run again. Something in her voice made Thomas study her more carefully. You're going to make a stand. I'm going to finish what we started in Baltimore, and I'm going to do it from the place Marcus and I built together. He was quiet for a moment. I can leave some of my people here, watching your house, providing security. I'd rather see them than have them hiding. Makes it clear I'm protected. Done. He stood. I need to ask you something, though. Emma's going to want to know if you're coming with her. I can't. I have work to do here. She trusts you, maybe more than she's trusted any adult in years. Evelyn felt the weight of that. Then I need to explain it to her in a way she'll understand, in a way that doesn't feel like abandonment. They went to the living room together. Emma looked up as they approached, her expression guarded but hopeful. Evelyn sat beside her, taking her small hands. Emma, honey, I need to tell you something important. Thomas has found a safe place for you. Somewhere Meridian can't reach. Somewhere you can be just a kid again. Will you come with me? The question pierced her heart. I can't, baby. I have something important to do here. Something that will help protect you and all the other children Meridian has hurt. The files, Emma said quietly. The evidence. You're so smart. Yes, the files, but also testimony, investigation, exposure. I'm going to make sure the world knows what Meridian really is. What if they come for you? Then I'll be ready. And Thomas is going to leave some very capable people to watch over me. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Everyone always leaves me somewhere. Everyone always says it's for my safety. Evelyn pulled her close. I know, and I know words don't mean much when you've been disappointed so many times. But I'm going to make you a promise, and I keep my promises. When this is over, when Meridian is exposed and you're truly safe, I will come find you, and we'll have hot chocolate and talk about normal things. And you can just be Emma, not a subject, not a case file, just you. You promise? I promise. The girl clung to her and Evelyn held her until the trembling stopped, committing every detail to memory. This child who'd stumbled into her life during a snowstorm. This child who'd reminded her who she used to be. An hour later, Emma was in one of the sedans with Sarah Blackwood, a solid woman with steel-gray hair and kind eyes who promised Evelyn she'd guard the girl with her life. Sarah had knelt down to Emma's level, speaking softly about the safe place waiting for her. Emma looked back through the window as they drove away, her small face pale, her hand raised in a wave. Evelyn waved back, not moving until the car disappeared from sight. Only then did she let her arm drop, let her shoulders sag under the weight of what she'd done. She'd sent a traumatized child away with strangers because it was the safest option. It was the right choice. But it still felt like abandonment, like one more broken promise in a child's life, already full of them, like every adult who'd ever claimed to care and then walked away. But this time would be different. Evelyn would make sure of it. Thomas stayed behind. The files? He asked quietly. She retrieved them from the trunk, 30 years of hidden evidence spread across her kitchen table. Thomas photographed each page with his encrypted phone, his expression growing darker as he worked through the contents. Some of these names, he said quietly. Dr. Richard Carmichael, do you know what he's doing now? He ran psychological operations in Baltimore. He's currently a senior advisor to Health and Human Services. On paper, he oversees child welfare programs nationwide. Thomas pulled up his tablet. And Dr. Patricia Vance founded Meridian 5 years after Baltimore shut down. She's the CEO now. They built connections methodically, tracing how people had scattered after Baltimore but never really left the field. How they'd gone private, found ways to continue their work outside official oversight. "This is bigger than I thought," Thomas said finally. "This isn't rogue operators, it's a coordinated network that's been operating for decades. Baltimore wasn't shut down because we exposed it. It was shut down because it got exposed. They just moved the pieces around." "What's our move?" "I take these to DC today. Meet with my journalist contact tonight. She'll need time to verify sources, build the story, but once she has enough, she'll publish." He looked at her seriously. "The moment that story goes live, Meridian will know someone talked. They'll come looking for the leak. Let them look." "Evelyn, these people—" "I know exactly what these people are capable of. I helped train some of them, remember? But they made a mistake. They came to my door. They threatened me in my home. They tried to take a child I was protecting." She met his eyes. "They reminded me who I was before I chose invisibility. And that person doesn't back down." Thomas packed the files carefully, creating multiple encrypted backups. "I'll have a team here within the hour. Visible presence, armed, professional. Anyone who comes for you will know you're protected." "Thank you, Thomas, for believing me, for helping Emma. Thank you for keeping the faith, for not letting Baltimore stay buried." After Thomas left with the files, Evelyn walked through her quiet house. She touched familiar objects, ran her fingers. Along Marcus's favorite chair stood looking at their wedding photo on the mantel. This house held 40 years of memories. She remembered Marcus proposing in this living room, down on one knee despite his bad back. Remembered bringing their daughter home from the hospital. Remembered Christmas mornings and Sunday dinners, the comfortable rhythm of a life built together. And she remembered his funeral, the house full of people who slowly drifted away until she was alone. But standing here now, she didn't feel alone. She felt purposeful, like she was finally doing something that would make Marcus proud. She went to the bedroom and methodically prepared. The gun she cleaned with careful precision, loading it, checking the action. The weight felt both familiar and terrible. The documents she organized with the same care she'd once used for official reports, making copies, storing them throughout the house. One set in the kitchen behind the good china, another in the bathroom cabinet. A third in the garage tucked into Christmas decorations. Evidence distributed so thoroughly that even if they found some, they wouldn't find it all. She made lists of names, dates, connections, drew diagrams showing how the old program connected to the new, created a trail that would lead investigators exactly where they needed to go. By the time Thomas's additional security arrived, Evelyn had transformed her home into something between a fortress and an archive. By evening, Thomas's team had arrived. 3 vehicles, 6 people positioned strategically around her property. They introduced themselves briefly, professional and courteous, then took up positions that made it clear anyone approaching would be seen and assessed. Evelyn made tea and sat in Marcus's chair, watching the street through her window, waiting. The phone rang just after midnight, shattering the quiet. Evelyn had been sitting in the dark, watching shadows move outside, waiting. She'd let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Mrs. Moss." A woman's voice, smooth and professional, with the kind of measured calm that came from years of controlling conversations. "My name is Dr. Patricia Vance. I believe it's time we talk directly, without intermediaries or misunderstandings." Evelyn's hand tightened on the receiver, the architect herself, the woman who'd taken Baltimore's ashes and built something even more insidious from the ruins. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Dr. Vance. On the contrary, you have something that belongs to my organization, a child who requires specialized care that you're not qualified to provide. Emma needs proper medical supervision, continued therapeutic intervention. By keeping her from us, you're actually harming her recovery. Emma doesn't belong to anyone. She's a human being, not property, not a research subject. She's also a participant in a federally protected research program with significant national security implications. By harboring her, you're interfering with classified work. That's a serious federal crime, Mrs. Moss, one that carries substantial penalties. Classified work. Evelyn's voice dripped with contempt. Is that what you're calling it now? Isolating children, subjecting them to psychological torture, training them for purposes they can't possibly consent to understanding. A pause, and when Vance spoke again, her voice had cooled several degrees. The work we do saves lives, Mrs. Moss. We identify children with extraordinary capabilities and help them reach their full potential. Children who would otherwise be lost in broken systems, warehoused in inadequate foster care, their gifts wasted. We give them purpose, direction, the chance to serve something greater than themselves. You isolate them from everyone they know. You study them like lab rats. You break them down psychologically and rebuild them into whatever you need them to be, all before they're old enough to understand what's being taken from them. They're being prepared for important work you once believed in, if I recall your Baltimore records correctly. Or have you forgotten the reports you filed, the assessments you conducted, the children you helped us identify back then? And I've spent 30 years regretting every moment of it, trying to make amends by staying invisible, by not causing more harm. Vance's voice hardened, losing its professional veneer. Then you're a hypocrite, Mrs. Moss. You helped build the foundation we're standing on. You developed half the psychological assessment protocols we still use. Don't pretend you have moral high ground when your hands are just as dirty as ours. Maybe I don't have moral high ground. Maybe I'm just as guilty as you are for what happened in Baltimore. Evelyn's voice was quiet but steady. But I can still try to tear down what I helped create. I can still try to save the children you're destroying now, even if I can't save the ones I failed back then. Mrs. Moss, I'm going to be very clear with you. The people who protect Meridian's work are powerful. Not just bureaucrats and politicians, but people with real resources, real reach. If you attempt to expose us, if you go public with whatever you think you know, you will lose. Your reputation will be destroyed. Your freedom will be taken. Possibly your life. All for one confused child who will end up back in the system anyway, forgotten and alone. Is that really worth it to you? Evelyn thought about Emma's face in the car window, about the 47 others still trapped, about all the children from Baltimore she'd failed to save. Yes, she said simply. She is. She hung up. 5 minutes later, a car pulled up across the street, then another. By dawn, 3 vehicles were stationed within view of her house. Not hiding, not pretending. A clear message that Meridian knew where she was and wouldn't let her forget it. Evelyn called Thomas. They're here. 3 vehicles, at least 9 people. Jesus, okay, I'm sending reinforcements. 2 more teams, heavily armed. They'll be there in 90 minutes. Did you meet with the journalist? Last night. She's very interested. Already started making calls. But Evelyn, if Meridian's positioning outside your house, then we're running out of time. How fast can she publish? She needs 48 hours to verify sources and build a legal defense against lawsuits. But she's moving as fast as she can. 48 hours, I can hold that long. Don't engage with them. Don't give them an excuse. I won't start anything, but I'll finish it if they force my hand. She spent the day watching the watchers, noting patterns, shift changes. By noon, she'd identified 9 individuals total, working in 3-person rotations. They stayed in their vehicles mostly, but occasionally one would get out, always keeping the house in view. They were making a show of it, wanting her to feel trapped. But Evelyn Moss wasn't looking for a way out. She'd spent 30 years running, hiding, and then a child had stumbled into her yard during a blizzard, and everything she'd buried came back. All the training, all the skills, all the determination. She wasn't the frightened woman who'd fled Baltimore. She wasn't the widow who'd faded into invisibility. She was someone who'd pulled a freezing child from the snow and decided that child mattered more than safety. Thomas's reinforcements arrived in the afternoon. They positioned themselves strategically, making it obvious to Meridian's watchers that Evelyn had professional protection. The dynamic shifted. Meridian's people started taking photos, making calls, clearly reporting back. Good, Evelyn thought. Let them report. Let them escalate. She'd be ready. As the sun set, she sat in Marcus's chair with hot tea and thought about Emma, safely on her way to West Virginia. Thought about the files being reviewed by an unstoppable journalist. Thought about the 47 children still, trapped, waiting for someone to save them. "I'm sorry it took me so long," she whispered, "but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until this is finished." The 48 hours crawled by like weeks. Evelyn sat in her house, surrounded by Thomas's security team, watching Meridian's vehicles maintain their vigil across the street. They were waiting for something, waiting for orders, waiting for the right moment. She didn't give them one. During those 2 days, memories kept surfacing. Baltimore, 1994, a government facility where she'd worked as a medical liaison, helping coordinate care for children in what was called a resilience study. She'd believed the mission statement. It had taken her 6 months to realize what was really happening. The children weren't being helped. They were being sorted, tested, broken down, and rebuilt. And the ones who showed the most promise disappeared into programs she wasn't cleared to know about. She'd tried to stop it, gathered evidence, documented abuses, found other staff willing to testify. They'd built a case that should have ended everything. Instead, it had been sealed under national security orders. The program was officially shut down, but the people running it scattered to new positions, and Evelyn had been told that if she ever spoke about it again, she'd face federal prosecution. So she'd run. Changed her name, moved across the country, married Marcus, and tried to forget. For 30 years, she'd convinced herself that silence was survival. She'd been wrong. On the second night, Thomas called. "The story publishes tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., Washington Post, front page. The journalist has everything, verified every source, built an ironclad case. Meridian won't be able to contain it." How much did she include? All of it. The Baltimore connection, the current facilities, Emma's testimony, your evidence. She even got 2 former Meridian employees to go on record. It's comprehensive and devastating. Evelyn felt something unclench in her chest. Emma? Safe. Sarah says she's doing well, all things considered. She asks about you every day. Tell her I'll come soon. Tell her I kept my promise. I will. He paused. Evelyn, once this story breaks, all hell is going to break loose. Meridian will know you're the source. They're going to come for you, hard, legal, or otherwise. Let them come. I'm ready. My team will stay in position, but if they breach, I know what to do. She'd spent the past 2 days preparing, not just organizing evidence, but remembering old skills, old protocols, how to defend a position, how to buy time, how to survive when survival seemed impossible. She hung up and looked around her living room. Marcus's chair, their wedding photo, the life they'd built here. She'd chosen this ground deliberately. If this was where she'd make her stand, it would be in the place that mattered most. At 3 in the morning, she heard engines, multiple vehicles moving fast. She was at the window instantly, gun in hand. 6 SUVs converged on her street, not the surveillance teams that had been watching. These were different, tactical, professional, the kind of people who didn't ask questions, just followed orders. Thomas's security team moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Evelyn watched as brief negotiations happened in the street. Then Thomas's people fell back to defensive positions around her house, creating a perimeter but not engaging. Smart. They couldn't win a direct confrontation, so they were forcing Meridian to either retreat or commit to something much more visible. Meridian chose visibility. A woman emerged from the lead vehicle. Even in the darkness, Evelyn recognized her from the photographs, Dr. Patricia Vance herself. She walked toward the house with absolute confidence, flanked by 2 large men who moved like military contractors. Evelyn's phone rang. "Mrs. Moss, this is your last chance. Give us the child and the evidence and we'll leave. Continue this foolishness and you'll lose everything." "Emma's not here. She's somewhere you'll never find her. And the evidence?" Evelyn smiled. "That publishes in 3 hours. You're too late." A pause. "You're lying. Call the Washington Post. Ask for Rachel Sullivan. See what she says." Another pause, longer this time. Vance was making calls, Evelyn realized, confirming. And when she confirmed that the story was real, that it was about to go public and couldn't be stopped, everything would change. 3 minutes later, Vance's expression shifted from confident to furious. She barked orders, and her team began moving toward the house with clear intent. Evelyn stepped back from the window, her training taking over. She'd defended positions before, years ago, in situations most people would consider impossible. This was just another impossible situation, and she'd survived those too. The first breach attempt came at the back door. Thomas's people stopped it with a combination of positioning and very loud warnings. The second came at a window. Same result. Vance was testing defenses, looking for weaknesses, but she was also stalling, Evelyn realized, waiting for something. Then Evelyn heard it, a different sound cutting through the night. Rotors, multiple helicopters coming fast, but these weren't Meridians. Floodlights swept across the street, illuminating everything in harsh white brilliance. 3 helicopters descended, marked with federal insignia. Real federal agents, not contractors. And from ground vehicles that had quietly surrounded the area, more personnel emerged. Vance's team froze. You could assault a private residence with hired muscle and claim it was a civil matter. You couldn't do that when federal agents were watching. Thomas appeared at Evelyn's door. The story broke early. The Post published 3 hours ahead of schedule when they heard Meridian was mobilizing. It went live 20 minutes ago, and it's already everywhere. Every major news outlet is picking it up. So this is over? The immediate danger, yes. The fight, just beginning. He looked exhausted but satisfied. But Evelyn, you did it. You actually did it. She watched through her window as federal agents detained Vance and her team. Watched as the woman who'd built an empire on exploiting children was led away in handcuffs. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the first real breath after drowning for 3 decades. The next hours blurred together. Federal investigators arrived at her house, documenting everything. The evidence she'd hidden throughout her home was cataloged and secured. Her testimony was recorded. And through it all, news vans lined her street. Cameras pointed at the house where an elderly black woman had exposed one of the most insidious child exploitation networks in recent history. By noon, the story had consumed the news cycle. Meridian's facilities were being raided across 4 states. Children were being removed, placed in legitimate protective custody. Former employees were coming forward with additional testimony, and the names Evelyn had documented decades ago were finally facing consequences. Dr. Richard Carmichael resigned from HHS within hours. Dr. Patricia Vance was charged with multiple federal crimes, and the Shell Corporation's funding Meridian found themselves under intense scrutiny. But what struck Evelyn most was the children. 47 children who'd been invisible to the world, now seen. 3 days later, Thomas drove her to West Virginia. Sarah Blackwood's compound was everything he'd promised. Secure, comfortable, hidden in mountains, and there, in a small room with afternoon sunlight, sat Emma. The girl looked up when Evelyn entered. Then Emma launched herself across the room, and Evelyn caught her, holding tight. "You came," Emma whispered. "You actually came." "I promised, didn't I?" They sat together for hours. Evelyn explained everything. The story, the raids, the arrests, how Meridian was being dismantled. "What happens to us now?" Emma asked. "The other kids and me? Real help, real therapy, real homes if we can find them, and people watching to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." Evelyn took her hand. "It won't be easy, but you'll have support." "What about you?" "I'm going to stay involved. Make sure the investigations continue. Make sure the children get what they need. And I'm going to visit you if you want me to." "I want that." Emma paused. "Will you tell me about Baltimore sometime?" "Someday, when you're ready." Evelyn smiled. "But not today. Today, let's just be two people who survived something terrible." Emma nodded. "I'm glad I ran into the storm. I'm glad I found your house. Because you saved me." "No, baby, we saved each other." As the sun set over the mountains, Evelyn sat on Sarah's porch, watching Emma play with a dog. The girl was laughing, a sound Evelyn had never heard from her before. Thomas joined her, coffee in hand. "You're a hero, you know. The media's calling you that." "I'm not a hero. I'm someone who tried to make up for 30 years of cowardice. You protected a child when no one else would. You risked everything to expose the truth. That's heroic." Evelyn sipped her coffee, thinking about the road ahead. Congressional hearings, probably, more testimony. Years of watching the legal system process what she'd exposed, but also watching children heal. "What will you do now?" Thomas asked. "Go home. Help coordinate victim support. Visit Emma regularly." She paused. "And maybe finally forgive myself for Baltimore. You didn't stay silent. You gathered evidence, kept it safe. That's not silence. That's patience." Felt like cowardice. Maybe it was both. Most courage is. 3 months later, Evelyn testified in federal court against Meridian's leadership. She spoke for 2 full days, walking through everything she'd witnessed, everything she'd documented, everything she'd kept hidden for 3 decades. When she stepped down from that stand, she felt something shift inside her. Not absolution, not complete peace, but something lighter. The convictions came quickly. Vance received 23 years, Carmichael 15. The system wasn't perfect, and justice would never fully account for what had been done. But it was something. Evelyn returned to her small house at the edge of town. The media circus had finally died down, though occasionally someone would recognize her at the grocery store and quietly thank her. She'd become visible again, but on her own terms this time. Not hiding, not running, just living. Emma came to visit that summer. She was thriving in a new foster placement with a kind woman named Rebecca who actually listened. She was attending regular school, seeing a therapist who actually helped. She still had nightmares sometimes, still struggled with trust. But she was healing, slowly and genuinely. They sat together on Evelyn's porch, drinking lemonade, watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. Normal, peaceful, everything that had been stolen from Emma for 2 long years was slowly being returned, piece by piece, moment by moment. "I got a letter from Maya," Emma said quietly. "She's doing okay, angry, but okay. She thanked me for running, said it saved all of them." "You were very brave." "I was terrified." "That's what bravery is, being terrified and doing it anyway." Emma leaned against her, and Evelyn put an arm around the girl's shoulders. They sat like that as the sun set, as the streetlights came on, as the world continued its normal rhythm around them. Evelyn thought about that night in the snow, about finding a freezing child and making a choice that would change everything, about how one moment of compassion had unraveled 30 years of hiding and brought down an empire built on cruelty. She thought about Marcus, about how proud he would have been of her, about how she'd finally done something truly worth the life and love he'd given her. And she thought about all the invisible people in the world, people who were overlooked and forgotten. The ones everyone assumed didn't matter. She'd been one of them once. Emma had been one too, not anymore. The door had opened that terrible winter night during the storm. A child had stumbled through it, desperate and freezing, and in saving her, Evelyn had saved herself. Sometimes that's exactly how rescue works. You pull someone from the freezing snow and you both come back to life. If staying silent kept you safe for 30 years, but speaking up could save a child's life, which would you choose? Like and subscribe for more stories that make you think.